Reserve. The root of all our evil, it begins with the Federal Reserve. Hey, yeah, well, let's go back in time when everybody was so proud of America.
I'm Tommy Salmons. This is year 0. Today, the 9/11 deep dive with Adam Fitzgerald. I think you're going to really enjoy this one. We dive deep into a lot of this stuff through a lot of these episodes, but this is one of my favorite ones to record, so I really think you'll like it. I really think you'll get into the information that we're spreading on this one. If you're like me, you like BBC, and there's nothing like a BBC in your mouth. So if you want the lingering flavor of a BBC in your mouth, go to foxandsons.com. Foxandsons.com is where you will get a very nice smoked chocolate BBC in your mouth. Go to foxandsons.com for your big, bold coffee. And if you sign up for an order of more than $20, you'll get 15% off if you use 0 as your code. So go to foxandsons.com for a great big, bold coffee. That's your BBC. Put it in your mouth. Maybe let it linger there for a little bit. Let them know that you've come around because of year 0, and use the code 0 when you make any order over $20 for 15% off at foxandsons.com. That's Fox, the letter N, sons.com for your big, bold coffee, baby. RyanBunting.com. For all of your graphic design needs, go to RyanBunting.com. Ryan Bunting is a shitty libertarian. He's a shitty person. He's a shitty business owner. And he's a shitty graphic designer, which is why he needs your charity at RyanBunting.com. Go to RyanBunting.com and give him all the charity you can give him, because Ryan Bunting is a starving artist. He's a shitty artist, but he's a starving artist. So feed that fucker at RyanBunting.com for all of your graphic design needs. LibertarianInstitute.org. That's where you'll find me, Patrick McFarlane, Kyle Anzalone, Scott Horton, Keith Knight, Dave DeCamp, Will Porter, Kim Robinson. All of us motherfuckers are over at the LibertarianInstitute.org. Every once in a while, you might run into a Jim Bovard or a Ron Paul. But go to LibertarianInstitute.org and enjoy all of the content that we are creating for you over at the LibertarianInstitute.org. It's for you, by us. Because you couldn't do it right. No, I'm just kidding. Go to libertarianinstitute.org and check out all the work we're doing, because we're working really hard over there. So, libertarianinstitute.org. Thank you, Tom Burton, for the music. Enjoy the show. All right. Here with Adam Fitzgerald once again. We're going to continue this 9/11 deep dive.
Yeah, good evening, Tommy.
What's going on, buddy?
What's going on, pal?
Nothing new. Same old, same old.
Same old, same old. Yet we're touching on a very taboo subject today.
Oh yes, we will be, and I guess that's pretty average for me. I like to touch on taboo. So
you like to go with the push the boundaries are.
I do. I like to. I do.
It's actually very daring. It's actually I like that creativity and uniqueness about people. Is that you could talk about the very generalities of everyday life, but when you push the boundaries, that's when you get the the answers to some of your questions, the real questions that lead to some answers regarding the most often forgot about parts of, especially the subject of 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we don't forget, like, to ask the tough questions and get into uncomfortable subjects. I think I got into that, as I mentioned before, reading up on the CIA and realizing how uncomfortable the history of the CIA made me. And knowing that I was, whether I was initially involved or immediately involved in I was kind of guilty by proxy, because it's the United States Central Intelligence Agency and I'm a United States citizen. So understanding that a lot of times we say we, when we're talking about the actions of the military or the actions of the DOJ or the actions of the United States government. And I just kind of felt like this amount of guilt whenever I would read on these subjects, but I learned to stomach them, and instead of be turned off by them, they kind of motivated me to dig deeper, because I was like, wait, if these people are I'm guilty by association to these acts, and if I'm guilty by association, I'd like to know what I'm associating with. And so I just started digging into that type of stuff. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to dive into subjects that a lot of people find uncomfortable, and in ways, and say things and do things in ways. Part of that is just my background. I mean, I haven't had an easy life. It's always been kind of rough. So, and I'm a truck driver. I've worked in the oil field. I was in the infantry when I was in the military. So it's kind of like, there's no like smooth edges to this exterior. It's just all, let's just like take things on head on and like just figure it all out. And I'm not going to sit here and beat around the bush or, try to make you feel better, but about, how bad shit is. Like, let's just take it on head on and see what we can accomplish.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And the only way we're going to get to some of those answers is by asking the uncomfortable questions, actually. And, this subject of what they call the dancing Israelis is certainly something that's been maligned in the truther sphere, but it also is quite lacking when it comes to actual intelligence regarding them. But we do have some questions that do have answers regarding them, and hopefully we'll touch on them tonight.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna you have the answers. I have the questions. I do want to touch on something, because I remember, like, when you and I first talked about the subject, I had remembered hearing that there were several dozen sales of Israel, of the Israeli intelligence active in the United States. And you quickly corrected me, and you're like, no, it wasn't that many. It was just two. And but they were large cells, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, you had two different cells. One was the art student ring, which is often maligned and mistaken for the art student in the World Trade Center, but they weren't Israelis. They were the wrong art student ring. The art student ring is actually a couple of, it was actually approximately 250 to 300 Israelis that were selling cheap art to homes of the Drug Enforcement Agency and the FBI. And they were operating in the southwest and northeast of the country. And there's an infamous memo called the Gerald Shea memo, who's a former legal counsel in California. And he investigated the foreign intelligence operations known as the Art Student Ring. And if you read that memo, and I suggest that you do so, it's publicly available, it will show you the intricate details of these operations that were, by the way, was the largest foreign intelligence operation in U.S. history at the time. And very few, and predictably, very few media outlets reported on it. One great article, and I'm looking at it right now, is the Christopher Ketchum article when he wrote for Salon magazine, dated May 7, 2002. It's called The Israeli Art Student Mystery. And Ketchum actually outlines regarding the Israeli art student ring that penetrated all throughout 2001, the DEA, the ATF, the Air Force, and Secret Service, and the FBI. And also at the same time, there was another Israeli foreign intelligence operation that was involving moving companies, most notably in New York, New Jersey, and Florida. And everybody who's involved with the 9/11 investigation themselves is aware of the urban moving systems. But there were other moving companies, such as Classic International Movers, White Glove Movers, Max Movers, and such. And when the employees of the urban moving systems that were detained on September 11, 2001, in their notebook, they had numbers of all these moving companies that were operating in the Northeast, and they had their phone numbers and everything. And they also found a map of New York, and highlighted in yellow was the World Trade Center and Doric Towers, which is where, of course, everybody remembers the Israelis that were celebrating, and the media called them the dancing Israelis. The FBI called them the high fivers. But I'll talk about that if you want from the start on September 11, 2001, which led us into the history of the Israeli operation systems that were operating in the year 2000, 2001.
Well, yeah, I obviously I want to get into that subject, but I want to back up some, and to the Israel America's alliance here, and how good of allies has Israel been, to the U.S. And a lot of people don't believe some of the things that Israel has been accountable for and guilty for in the past, especially when it comes to hurting the U.S. and the amount of money and their activity as far as lobbying the U.S. government. I remember whenever I think it was when Obama was president, there was a point when Obama was saying one thing out of and Netanyahu was here in the U.S. speaking to the American media, saying no, he doesn't know that's not the way it's going to happen, or something like that. Yeah. Basically, completely contradicting Obama, and it went Netanyahu's way.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have a long-standing relationship that started back in the late 1800s with the invention of Zionism inside the United States, which was expedited under Louis Brandeis. But starting in the most recent of times, even through the 1950s and 60s, the United States has been a very strong supporter of Israel. It wasn't like that even in the 1920s and 30s, when we had a relationship with the Israeli people that were living in Europe at the time, before even the invention of the state of Israel that we know it today. The key to all of this is Theodore Herzl, who was considered the godfather of modern day Zionism, and his relationship with Louis Brandeis in New York at the time helped to create and fashion the modern state of Israel as we know it. And so this long-standing relationship began, really took a couple of years, because the United States was very, very wary of the Israeli government at first. But by the 1950s and late 50s and early 60s, the United States had coalitioned into a strong relationship with Israel, and they played a key role in the promotion of good relations with Israel and its neighboring Arab states, such as Syria and Libya, even Lebanon at the time, which are now considered enemies to Israel after so many years of military interventionism between these countries. And so ever since the invention of the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC as it's known, the United States has provided approximately $3 billion annually to the state of Israel. The only country that we give more funds to is Egypt, which has a even longer standing relationship with the United States. I would say that in total, since 1985, the United States has given a total of approximately $150 billion to Israel. And we consider Israel basically an extension of U.S. evangelicalism or U.S. imperialism. Even though we don't have a military base station there, we consider Israel a base station itself in the effect that it is right in the middle of the Arab Middle East. And so it's surrounded by their preconceived enemies, even though that these Arab countries were never considered enemies to the United States, even with the coalition of Israel in the 1930s and 40s. It wasn't until the United States and Great Britain, with the Balfour Declaration, to help the formation of Israel become basically a Zionist state. And so what we have now is basically a country that is built upon the precepts of Theodore Herzl's modern day version of Zionism, which is basically nationalism. It's similar to Christian evangelicalism here. And that's the irony of all this, is that in the religions itself, the evangelical Christians share no commonality with the religion of Judaism, for example. Israel is a very peculiar state in itself because it's actually torn between secularism, Hasidism, Judaism, and Zionism. Even though Zionism is a secular ideology, it is a very nationalist ideology, but you do have secularist Jews who are against Zionism. So but they all have a commonality. The commonality is that Israel must be a Jewish state. So they're very fervent about this. Even though that the religious Jews themselves would share the country with Palestinians, but they too believe that, yes, that Israel itself must be an Israeli governed state itself. Palestinians must never be a part of or a major part of the government itself. So the United States shares a very, very long-standing, very close relationship. And I think it's very tentative, if you ask me, in my opinion. And that is basically because Israel is not really a very good ally to the United States. And in the same way that Saudi Arabia is considered a very strong ally to the United States, they're not a very good ally to the United States either. And so why is Israel not a good ally to the United States? Because Israel caters to their espionage programs. They're very, very, I think they're probably one of the best in the world when it comes to espionage. I would consider Russia, Syria, and Pakistan to be just a bit levels better than Israel. But I would say Israel is indeed one of the best countries when it comes to espionage, when it comes to signals intelligence. And so the United States has basically been a victim of Israeli espionage, even going back to the 1970s and 60s. So with a country that's been inside the United States considered, collecting illegal intelligence operations and basically illegally obtaining information, sensitive information regarding the United States that goes back so many decades, you would think that this country is an enemy to the United States. But no, they consider them, they're willing to look the other way, consider them a strong ally. So it just goes to show you that the United States are willing to overlook the legalities of other countries, even if they're considered so-called allies to them.
I would push back on one little point, and just to be, just for clarity on the podcast, where you said evangelicals have nothing in common with Judaism. Whereas that is true with modern day Judaism, Christianity and Judaism in the early first century was actually the exact same religion, and they split off. And the term Christianity was actually pejorative that was used by the Jews against the Jews that believed in Christ. And then those Jews then adopted the term Christian as their rightful term. Originally, they were called the Way, and they adopted the term adopted the term Christian, but they were Jews in the early 1st century. And then somewhere along the 5th century, the ancient Jew kind of changed into what we see today as Judaism, which is something a little different than a religious Judaism. It's more of an ethnic Judaism, which is, kind of a different story. And Christianity kind of left the Jewish heritage, and what you know of as today as evangelicals didn't even start becoming a thing until about the 16th or 17th century. So, I mean, just to be technical.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought this up, because what I was meaning between evangelical Christianity and Judaism today is that in the religious tenets, evangelical Christianity believes that Christ comes back regarding the Battle of Megiddo, and then you have the 144,000 selected that rises into heaven, and then you have the war, which basically Christ actually kills those who don't convert. And with Judaism, they actually believe that the Mashiach returns and actually promises the Jews, the selected ones, to have, I think it's 500 Gentile slaves in heaven, if I'm correct.
Mm.
Or is it 100? Or is it I forgot the number.
I'd have to look into that. I don't know too much about that.
It's funny because
I'm like, well, wait, they were the same thing at one point. So.
Right, yeah, but they're so far apart. When it comes to, I guess, politics, they use one another to achieve their aims. But when it comes to religion, they're so far apart. I think Islam shares more in commonality with Christianity than it does with Judaism today. But there's so many different Christian sects today that, who knows?
Yeah, it's hard to keep up. Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry. That was just me being autistic for a minute. So
no, that's fine.
Yeah. One of the things a lot of people don't realize too is they don't know the story of the USS Liberty. And this is kind of a major it isn't. I guess I say it should be a major wedge between what the alliance of Israel and the US, and for some reason there was never any repercussions. There was never any, even media talking about it. It just was almost a moot subject. It was like still today it's kind of taboo. It's like you're not even supposed to bring it up.
Regarding with Israel, it's become such a taboo subject that even if bringing up illegalities of a certain government and country, it's considered anti-Semitic, and that's how they attack their defectors. Regarding the USS Liberty, I can't really speak on anything regarding length of the subject because I really haven't studied much about it. But from what I know, it's basically an attack on a U.S. naval ship on June 8th of 1967. Which I think killed.
I don't know anything, but here's the exact day and the exact number of people killed. I'm joking.
Oh no! I was saying,
I'm making fun of you because you're like, I don't know anything about this subject, but the exact date and time and number of people killed were.
But that's all I know.
You already know more than like 99.9% of the people out
I feel bad because I actually thought you were going to give me the lesson on it.
No.
It was June 8, 1967. I think it was like 30 people or more that were killed on.
Yeah, it was. It was, if I remember correctly, the United States was siding with Saudi Arabia or something like that against like is Israel for whatever, and Israel was making a point saying.
Yeah, it was during this.
It was during, it wasn't it during the 6 Day War?
Yeah, I was just going to say it was during the 6 Day War.
Yeah. And it was like United States was basically telling Israel to stand down and like this war isn't worth it. And Israel bombed the United States, the naval ship, and then say, oh, well, it was an accident, so.
Right. And they apologized for the attack, but said there'd been an error or something. But yet the United States had flags on top of the ship. And if you read, there are people who survived that attack that came out later.
Submarine. If you're in a submarine, you're looking at the bottom of the ship, not the top of the ship.
Right, exactly. The funny thing is that if you talk to survivors of the USS Liberty, they've come out more so now than ever. And they basically said that Israel knew exactly that was a U.S. ship.
Yeah.
And I think the president wasn't the president at the time, Wilson. Was it Woodrow Wilson?
No, not in 67. It would have been.
No, I'm sorry,
Johnson.
Thank you. Wow, I'm way off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wilson was long dead.
Yes. Sorry.
No, he
sorry
was. I only know that because he's guilty for the Federal Reserve, and that was in 1913. There's no way he was still president in 67.
Right. It just goes to show you that sometimes I'm wigging it. But yeah, that's true. Yeah, and this is a huge incident when it happened, and basically the United States actually covered up for Israel in their reports later on, and the Department of the Navy basically gave Israel a pass on this, and so did the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And so for something like this, there should have been repercussions, and there were not. And that just goes to show you that that has not changed to present day Israel today. And look at all the nature of war, the humanitarian crimes they commit regarding the Palestinians. And you have, dozens of human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch that basically, state that, hey, Israel is committing these war crimes. And you have the infamous Goldstone reports that basically is written by, I think it's Baruch Goldstein. I forgot his first name, so forgive me. That basically, he wrote after the first Intifada the second Intifada, where he wrote about the Israeli military conducting these egregious crimes and showering Palestinian homes in the Gaza Strip with, white phosphorus and all these tens of thousands of bullets regarding just this lone wolf rocket attack where Israel basically will precipitate. And then Israeli military would just overreact to the neighborhood and just enact all these illegal operations and kill children and dozens of people because it killed one Jew or hurt 3 people. I mean, you have these these Palestinian sects like Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad that are these jihadist Salafist sects. But they don't have a standing military. It's like, they don't really pose a threat to Israel whatsoever. I mean, if Israel basically wanted to, they could destroy these groups. But it serves a purpose because it keeps the Palestinians in these confined areas behind these racially segregated checkpoints. Because if they destroy Hamas and they destroy the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, well, then they have no enemy. And they, basically, they have no right to, corral these Palestinians in these inhumane conditions.
Right. Well, and kind of the point I wanted to get to, and we don't have to go through the entire history of Israel, obviously, but kind of my entire point was to point out that Israel is not beyond, questioning, and that those people that say that the subject that we're talking about tonight is like they're beyond questioning. You can't ask these questions. You can't, if you ask this, you're anti-Semitic. And it's like, no, there are plenty of questions to be asked. And you labeling me a bigot or an anti-Semite is not going to stop me from asking questions.
No, and it shouldn't, and it's unfortunate that we have to be very careful this way because we have so many fringe theorists that destroyed this one subject of Israel. And I think regarding the subject of Israel, it's been literally, and I hate to use the phrase, hijacked by these fringe theorists because they're so desperate to blame Israel for something. And these are mostly fringe right-wingers that, not have no commonality with the, classic conservatives of the Republican Party. But these are just like anti-Israel, and they hide behind the flag of anti-Zionists. And I'm not speaking in general terms because that's not a general term to label a lot of these people that do have beefs regarding the crimes of Israel. And these are legitimate crimes and legitimate questions. But when it comes to Israel and 9/11, I don't think I've ever seen a more malign topic in all of 9/11, and it involves with the geopolitics and the fringe, most ridiculous aspects, almost like this damning charge on Israel being in charge of the whole operation, or this a real estate scam involving the World Trade Center, is so ridiculous that it basically covers or blankets the real conspiracies connecting Israel to the signals intelligence community that was operating before 9/11. Now, what do we know about that? Well, we won't know anything because we deported all of them. And what did we replace with that theory? The no planers, the Israeli firsters, they're involved. Larry Silverstein, he insurance scams and whatnot. None of this is true. And basically what happened was you started concentrating on these fringe theories, basically never bringing up these operations that Gerald Shea and a few others tried to warn the federal government about and basically ignored.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say that the people that are smuggling these ideas are feds,
right.
But if the feds couldn't have done a better job, it's like, so
I'm glad you brought that up because I have a friend of mine, co-researcher Sean Russell. He actually said one day, he goes, if Alex Jones wasn't invented by the feds, they would have invented somebody like him anyway, because he actually serves a purpose.
Yeah, no, they could have never done it because it's too on the nose.
Yes,
they would have never. They would have never thought to make it that on the nose.
Right, exactly.
They're like, nobody would ever believe this motherfucker.
Right, he's so out there, but he has such a huge platform that you would think, because I don't go around saying that certain people are feds. I just think that these people are basically, people that want to get out the first theory because it makes them relevant, and a lot of these people don't research properly. They're biased in their research.
I tend to believe that Alex Jones believes everything he says for the most part. Maybe not everything, but at least like 90%. And the reason I think that is if you how it is digging into these subjects, like you just dig into 9/11 and how that makes you feel, right? Yeah. Imagine digging into all the stuff that he talks about for 25 years. Imagine how insane you would be at the end of that, because no one had ever listened to you for 25 years and you're watching it happen in front of your face. And you're like, I've been telling you, motherfuckers. It's like,
it's very stressful at the same time, because I'm dealing with a lot of these people that talk about the fringe theories and not talk about the actual anomalies related to 9/11. I've been doing this for a couple of years now.
Yeah, you've been doing it, what, 16 years now?
Yeah, 16 years.
Yeah.
But I'm new to viral media, so I'm like 5 years, I'd say, upcoming. But I've been trying to give, the reason why is because I'm not sexy enough, right? So I just give you the straight.
I don't know who told you that. You sure got a pretty mouth.
Well, I can't go deliverance on you, but but I'm a straight shooter, and I don't need to dossy up the information because it doesn't need any more fanaticism behind it. I mean, the information I'm providing to you is actually quite illuminating and quite fanatical because of the amount of cover up that's involved with it. But if you need the imagination involved, well, then I don't know what to tell you. Right. But there are anomalies relating to Israel, but they're not talked about. It's unfortunate.
Well, let's dive into the facts on the ground, and then after we get through that, if we have time, then we'll talk about the different aspects and narratives that are out there that have kind of a different take on it, because sure. I think it's important to get both. Like, let's talk about what happened, and then, okay, this is how people are twisting it. And a lot of times, like, this is what you would call limited hangout. You take a piece of factual information and then you add in all this nonsensical stuff to bring people in and draw people off the path, right? And so it's very important that you get the facts out there and then you address these anti-narratives that are kind of steering people the wrong way.
Right, for sure. Well, I mean, it all starts on September 11, 2001. Very early morning, 7:30 a.m. Some very attentive woman by the name of Maria, whose last name is actually redacted in the FBI reports, wakes up at 7:30, and she recalls the time because her husband woke her as he got prepared to go to jury duty in Newark, New Jersey. When her husband went downstairs to purchase a newspaper, he returned and had breakfast with her. And then he left for jury duty at, I think it was an hour later. Somebody, a friend of hers, actually called her at approximately 9 a.m. and told her to go look at what's going on at the World Trade Center. And so she got her binoculars, and she's located in a place called Doric Towers. Doric Towers is actually a very large condominium on the other side of the Hudson, located in Jersey City, New Jersey. And she was on, I think, in the 21st floor. Don't hold me to it, but it's very high up. And she could see Lower Manhattan very clearly. It was a very clear day on Tuesday, September 11, 2001. And so with the binoculars, she actually saw this large gaping hole in the World Trade Center. And she recalls listening to 1010 Winds, and she was hearing about what was happening at the World Trade Center, and using her binoculars, she opened the balcony door and looked into, outside the balcony. And like I said, she was observing the World Trade Center from there. And then all of a sudden, she heard a commotion below her. And so she looked down with her binoculars, and she saw these three gentlemen yelling and high-fiving each other. And she looked over and saw them hugging and celebrating. And she appeared that they noticed her as well, but I guess they didn't care. And she recalled them, according to the FBI reports, that they were male in their mid-20s. None of them had like facial hair. All were wearing short sleeve shirts with lean builds. She actually gave like descriptive details about some of them to the FBI. And then she noticed that there was a gentleman kneeling on the what appeared to be a box van, a white van. It didn't have windows on the side, and it looked like a phone company van, very like a box truck, like a moving truck, as it would seem, like a U-Haul, but it was basically all white. The van was not word for perpendicular to the fence. So instead, the front of the van faced in the southeast direction. And there was this male that was on top of the roof on the passenger side of the vehicle. And he was facing the apartment complex, while another male kneeling on top of the front of the roof on the driver's side of the vehicle, and he's facing the World Trade Center. And then you have the third person kneeling on the portion of the roof of the vehicle, and he too was facing the Doric Towers. They were all facing in different directions. It's very strange. And they were taking still photographs of what was happening. She said that they were high-fiving each other, and that's where this the idea of naming them from the FBI, as a lot of people knows them as the dancing Israelis, but that's not what they were originally called. They were originally called the high-fivers. And because of that, the FBI called them that in the FBI reports. And this is available on archive.org if you want to see it and download it for yourselves. Or I can basically give you the article on Medium in which I took the FBI reports and chronologically ordered them with some thoughts of my own and some information I added in between. And it's called The Celebrating Israelis. It's one of my longest articles to date. In fact, it's my longest article to date regarding it. It took me about 6 months to write and put in chronological order. but it basically tells you the timeline regarding this Israeli operation team that was operating in the year 2001. And so when the vehicle pulled away, Maria, which, by the way, thankful to her, because we would not have known who these people were had it not been for her. And she basically took down a piece of paper, the license plate of the truck. And the license plate was JRJ 13Y or L3Y, something like that. Now, she held off on calling the police because she actually waited for her husband to come back from jury duty to see what the next step would be. And so when he came back from jury duty, she told him about what she had seen. And basically, he agreed to say, we need to contact the police regarding this. And so she did. And so she called the East Rutherford Police Department. And so they put out a nationwide Be on the Lookout, or BOLO as it's known, regarding a urban moving systems van with the license plate JRJ, I think it's 13Y or L31. And so it was first announced on WBV in Boston, in which my co-researcher, Nelson Martins, DJ Thermal Detonator, is one of the very first people to write, to make films based upon the news articles, the news reports regarding the Israelis themselves in film format. And so the BOLO went nationwide. And so everyone's looking for these trucks. On the other side of the mountain on September 11th in the early morning hours, there was another urban moving systems truck. And this one was located in Liberty State Park in Jersey City. And in the FBI reports, a male who observed this truck approximately 20 minutes after the attacks observed a urban moving system truck in Liberty State Park, which is located in Jersey City, New Jersey. The truck, according to him, the truck was about 2001 model box truck, GMC box truck, almost similar to that of Maria's description of the box truck that she saw at Door Towers in the garage area, the parking lot area. And so he saw two individuals, both light-skinned males, very thin builds. Both had denim jeans on. One was wearing a white shirt with a vest. The other one was wearing a darker colored shirt. And so he reported his findings later on to the police, the East Rutherford Police. And so basically, on the late afternoons, once the World Trade Centers collapsed and people were trying to leave the city, but there was a closed city. No one was allowed to get in or out of the city itself. And so these Israelis that were in the truck were seen at East Rutherford, East Rutherford, New Jersey Parkway. And so there was this policeman named Scott DiCarlo, who was informed of the dispatch earlier on about be on the lookout for a 2000 Chevy white van with registration license plate JYJ L3Y with three individuals. And on the side of the truck is urban moving systems. So he noticed a little bit of the way down this freeway that there was this white box truck coming at him. And so he looked at the license plate and saw that he wrote down JRJ2L3Y. It was just a number off. So he decided to call in and basically reconfirm the license plate. And he said, yes, I think this is it. And he wrote down 3RJ, and he looked again, it was 3RJ. His partner was Sergeant Dennis Ravelli, and they basically decided to approach the truck, Ravelli to the passenger side and Scott DiCarlo to the driver's side. So Scott DiCarlo noticed the driver and said, sir, could you stop the truck? And the guy basically stopped the truck. And so he said, could you step out of the truck? And the guy didn't budge. And he decided to pull his weapon out. And Dennis Ravelli pulled his weapon out at the passenger side, noticing that there was going to be a problem, he thinks. So Scott DiCarlo again orders the driver to come out vacate the vehicle. Again, no response. And according to Scott DeCall, he decided to basically open the truck himself and basically drag the person out of the truck. And so when he did that, Ravelli pointed his weapon to the passenger and said, everybody out of the truck, noticing that now instead of 3 people, there was basically 5 people in the truck. So he ordered all these men basically to the side of the road away from traffic. And so noticing that all these people were basically now looking and basically seeing what happened at Lower Manhattan, they all basically throwing garbage and spitting at these people. So now they had to add more police from East Rutherford come to the area to basically quell what Ravelli thought was going to be, Sergeant Ravelli thought was going to be a riot. And so they decided to get these guys away from the area. So the East Rutherford Police Department basically transported them to the state police facilities located inside the Meadowlands at the time, which was guarded by the state troopers to await the arrival of the FBI, who was going to investigate the September 11th attacks. So the driver was later identified as Sivan Kurzberg. And the passengers were basically his brother Paul Kurzberg, Oded Elner, Omar Gabriel Mamari, and Yaron Schmel. And those were the 5 people who would later be known as the Dancing Israelis by the media. That's who called them the Dancing Israelis. And it was later found out that a lot of these people, all these 5 of these people, basically had different passports to vacate the country in the next couple of days. Some of them were going to South America and then transfer over to Greece and back to Israel. Basically, the driver, Sivan Kurzberg, in his fanny pack, had cash of, I think it was like $5,000 or $4,500, somewhere between there. And also located in their vehicle was a map. And in the map was basically a picture, was a map of Lower Manhattan, New York. And highlighted in yellow was the World Trade Center and Doric Towers. And so they said, wow, these guys look like they might know what was going on September 11, 2001, the terrorist attacks. So they handed them over to the FBI. And so while they were driving there, Sivan Kurzberg
Were they, I'm sorry,
please.
Just quick. Were they carrying diplomatic passports or just regular passports?
No, just regular passports.
Okay.
Yeah, just regular passports. And so they were just like, they were all 5 of them were supposed to leave the country in the next 2 or 3 days. So as they were driving, Scott DeCole was driving some of the occupants in the van. Sivan Kurzberg basically told Scott DeCall as he was driving, goes, "We are Israeli. We are not your problem. Your problem is our problem. The Palestinians are the problem." And for anybody out there to basically take that at face value for anything, I would say that you're really reaching, because that's a very unique statement to make, very unusual. And I think I'm using that term very lightly here. Why would he say that? I don't know what to tell you. Why would that be a statement to be made regarding what was happening in the day itself? And the nature of the conversation would lead to that. I don't know. But Scott DeCall, and later himself, he did one interview and basically said that he basically didn't say anything that precipitated that answer. So anyway, they're dropped off at the Meadowlands, and the FBI takes over the investigation into these group of people. And basically, one of the first people they interviewed was Yaron Schmel. And Yaron Schmel told the FBI that they were on the West Side Highway during the incident, which was a lie, and that the black bag that the Sivan Kurzberg, the driver, was fumbling contained all the belongings, which included the $4,000 something that was in cash, and the maps and the phone book that was found with all these numbers in it relating to other moving companies, and that the officer, the special agent in charge, my co-researcher Nelson knows he's going to be very disappointed in me. Kevin Donovan, because he's the guy that was in charge of investigating Israelis. And there were many other agents involved with the investigation, but he was the head agent. And so when they were doing their background checks on some of these individuals that were known as Danzig Israelis, found out that a lot, all five, of course, are that they were at some point involved with the Israeli Defense Force. Of course, all the males are, but that Israel is Sivan and Paul Kurzberg basically were involved with some level of signals intelligence involving the rest of the detainees. Now, also on September 11, 2001, there was another urban moving system vehicle that was traveling outside. I think it was to Chicago or Ohio. I always get the destination wrong regarding this, but I think it's Ohio or Chicago that they were going to.
Weren't they on their way to Chicago and pulled over in Ohio?
No, they actually pulled over. That's a story I'm going to get to.
Okay.
They were actually pulled over coming back, but they were pulled over going there, and so they basically the officer let them go because they found out they were working at Urban Wood Systems, and before the bolo was actually put out, they drove away. So the next day on September 12th, that same truck was actually passing through Pennsylvania, and the town was called York, Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And so they basically were pulled over by Pennsylvania State Police. And so they pulled them over because of the bolo that was, on the day before. And so when they were looking in the vehicle, there was nothing in there, which is funny because they were going to a client and they were returning from a client and there's nothing in the truck. And so the two occupants are known as Roy Barak and Modi Bupal. Not many people know that. And so they were on their way back from Columbus, Ohio. That's right. Because I always forget the city, Columbus. That's not Pennsylvania, it's in Ohio. And Chicago, that's in Ohio. So the policeman ordered them out and said, do you work for Move Systems? Now, these weren't the same cops that were detaining them the day before and pulled them over. These are different cops. And so they said, yes, we work for Move Systems. So they called the manager. And the manager of Urban Moving Systems his name is Dominic Suter. And Dominic Suter was actually called by the FBI on September 11, 2001, because they held those five Danzig detainees, the five Danzig Israelis, because they worked for Moving Systems and told them where they were. And so they interviewed Suter again. They said, well, we have two guys here in Pennsylvania, and do they work for you? He said, yes, they work for me. And he said, well, they were traveling from a client in Columbus, Ohio, getting back to New Jersey. And he says, well, that's strange. He goes, well, what's strange about it? He goes, well, due to the prior day's events, we didn't have a client outside the state of New Jersey. And the cop basically said, well, how can you explain this? And Dominic Suter says, I can't. It's very strange. And so these two guys now basically are deported to the FBI, and they conducted their investigation into them as well. And interestingly enough, these two Israelis garnered way more attention, and their backgrounds were much more nefarious than those of the five Danzig Israelis, because according to the background of Modi Bupal, he was involved in a very covert signals intelligence program. And Roy Barak basically was a signals intelligence operator involving a very covert group in the military. So these guys basically had a much more in-depth background compared to the five Danzig Israelis, but nobody ever really talks about them. And so the investigation continued, and the FBI basically found out more about these individuals. So they asked the five Danzig Israelis, each of them, if they wanted to take a polygraph. They all declined, so they retained legal counsel. And so the pressure was on by the Israeli government and two unnamed senators who are in the FBI reports about pressure to let them go. And the FBI said, no, we're conducting investigation into them because we think these guys know more than what they are alluding to. And so because of that, they weren't released. And so the FBI got a warrant to basically look into the warehouse of Urban Moving Systems. But before they did that, they called in Dominic Suter for a second interview. And Dominic Suter said, sure. And instead, Dominic Suter basically got a one-way ticket to Israel and left his company behind. And when the FBI got their warrant and looked into the warehouse, and what did they find in this warehouse located in Weehawken, New Jersey? An entire warehouse full of furniture that was never properly delivered to the clients. And 2020 did an investigation into this. John Miller, those same John Miller who went and interviewed bin Laden in 1998 before the East Africa bombings, did an expose about these urban moving systems company that was garnering attention nationwide. Who were these people? And so there's camera located inside this warehouse showing you all the furniture that was left behind, and also a phone that had 99 messages on it. Basically, probably all the clientele bitching and complaining about their furniture not being delivered. So basically, what Dominic Suter did was basically left an entire company behind and left all his employees behind, basically with their hands out and saying, what the hell is going on here? And so that in itself should garner very intense scrutiny about why this guy would basically do this. So the FBI found that there were 16 computers in this warehouse. And believe me, Urban Moving Systems, I looked into it, it's a very small company. It didn't have to have 16 computers because the FBI collected 16 hard drives of these computers. And, you know, it just defies belief why there would be 16 computers in a very, very small, nondescript moving company that had a lot of complaints about rigging prices, which I was a short-time employee regarding a moving company when I lived in Vegas. And I worked for this company in 2003, and I worked for them for 8 months. And basically, they were a very small company, just like Urban Moving Systems, that they would rent trucks and move companies and charge you an exorbitant price that you can't pay, and they would hold your furniture if you didn't pay it. And a lot of these people come from very poor neighborhoods and, you know, didn't have the money, you know, that, because they would take their time and move, you know, a 2-hour move and make it a 5-hour move. So that's how they would jack the prices. So Urban Moving Systems had a lot of review of a lot of complaints, but also too, they had also garnered a government loan earlier in the summer of 2001 to the nature of, like, I think it was, I want to say it was $650,000 for June of 2001. I don't know the date, but it was June of 2001. And it was, and also they also got a non-federal funding of, I think, $500,000 more. So I'm like, wow, a big company like big loans like this, big contract loans like this for a small company, you know, it makes you wonder who exactly was Urban Moving System, what they were about. Well, it just goes to show you that this company had a lot of questions more than it have answers, because a lot of the questions that we wanted answered, well, Dominic Suter fled the country. So now it was left up to the employees of these companies exactly who these people were, and they weren't talking. So basically what happened was, I think it was Omar Mamre actually agreed to a polygraph, and he broke down and basically, you know, gave the jig up, saying that, you know, for weeks that he was lying, saying, oh, we were at a gas station, we didn't know what was going on. They were lying about what was going on. And soon the FBI began doing interviews with members of the neighbors at the Darkened Towers. They would go door to door, and this is in the FBI reports, redacted reports. And so a lot of these neighbors, they had their names redacted, of course, to protect the identity. But they were saying that in the early morning hours of September 11th, we have two separate neighbors that were basically saying that they saw a white box truck at 8 a.m. And that's about 36 minutes before the first plane struck. I'm sorry, 46 minutes before the first plane struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Now, they didn't say they didn't see anybody, because they didn't. And they said it was a white box truck. That's all they knew. They didn't see any decals on it, maybe because they only saw a portion of the truck, but they did see a white box truck. similar to that of Maria, who saw a white box truck in the parking garage of Dork Towers.
Yeah.
So the FBI basically put that in their reports. And so now the intense pressure of the Israeli government was coming. And so Alan Dershowitz, oh, what a grotesque individual.
That guy.
Yeah. Alan Dershowitz basically acted as a mediator between the dancing Israelis.
Jeffrey Epstein and the dancing Israelis.
Yeah, I mean, you go on. Right? Go on. This guy, and basically also
that guy is always in the middle of everything bad, right?
And exactly right. Wasn't he also a lawyer for the O.J. Simpson case? I think he was like a part-time lawyer based upon.
I would not doubt that.
Yeah,
I don't remember it, but I wouldn't put it past him.
Yeah, this guy has a very deplorable history behind him. Needless to say, he's a sleazebag. All right, so he's actually acting as a mediator between the two unnamed senators, who I think one of them was just forget his name.
Schumer.
Yes, thank you, Chuck Schumer. And I don't
he's in the middle of all that bullshit too.
He damn straight is.
He was the loudest voice against for Waco during Waco.
Yes, he was. I'm glad you brought that up. That's right.
That guy's a scumbag.
Oh, he's just when I hear his name, I cringe.
Yes.
And I just don't like it. And then also you have former Secretary of Department of Homeland Security. I'm sorry, he's that's after 9/11. He acted as he was an attorney under during the Bush and Obama administrations. Michael Chertoff, that's right, that's his name, Michael Chertoff. Yeah, there's another one, right?
Yeah, that's
one. Yeah,
throw Bill Barr in there for fun.
Yeah, why not? But you'll see, he actually was. That's right. He was the former special counsel to the New Jersey Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
And he was also involved with. He was actually involved with Bush's presidential campaign on criminal justice issues.
Yeah.
So he was part of the Department of Justice. So Chertoff actually also got himself involved regarding the pressure and release of these 5 dancing Israelis. And so after 71 days of the FBI, and the FBI was like, these guys know something. And not only that, during their investigation, when they were looking at the phone book, they noticed that there were other numbers. And we talked about this before we were recorded. They looked at these phone numbers. It was other moving companies such as Classic International Movies, White Glove Movies, Max Movies, right? And I think Urban Movies was also called Moishi Movies. Check with Ryan Dawson on that one. He would know about that more than me. And he's covered this extensively as well. And so what happened was, when they contacted these movie companies, they found a very similar subject was going on with them. So the FBI in Florida had detained a number of Israelis that were involved with Classic International Movies, because it was stated, and this is an error, that Classic International Movies moved one of the hijackers, and that's not true. They actually moved a name that was reported by the FBI as being part of the hijackers, but he was not, and his name was Nelson's gonna be disappointed, and Hamadi, I think his name was. God's sakes, I'm gonna butcher that one. I forgot the name, and you know what? That's gonna kill me, and I'm actually gonna cheat and look because I want to get that name right because it's important. But if I can't find it, it was actually a guy that was named by the FBI and as being part of the hijacking team, but he was not. But Classic International Movers basically moved this guy from Florida to out of the country to Saudi Arabia, though they helped them move out of the state anyway. And so he wasn't a part of it. And so Chertoff basically got the FBI to hand over the dancing Israelis and Roy Barak and Modi Butbol and all the other detainees in Florida, in New Jersey, in New York, to basically hand them over to INS, because every single one of them overstayed their visa, which was a student visa, which is in violation of a certain statute. I forgot the name of the statute for the Immigration Naturalization Services. And because that's the first crime they committed, that means the feds automatically have to hand them over to the proper authorities so that they can conduct an investigation and hand down the punishment to them. And what's their punishment? Deportation back to their home countries.
Yeah.
Even though these guys basically probably had run a massive signals intelligence program regarding members of the hijacking team of 9/11 and God knows who's else. At the same time, while that was going on, there was an even bigger intelligence operations center going on, much bigger. And this was called the Art Student Ring. And this was approximately 200 to 300 people, 250 to 300 people involved. And according to the Gerald Shea memo, which is based after the retired lawyer Gerald Shea out of San Obispo, California, through his own independent investigation, he found out that there was a number, dozens and dozens of these special operations group that were hiding behind an employee program called Israeli Art Student Program, selling these very cheap art to people involved with the DEA, the ATF, the Air Force, the Secret Service, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshal Service. All these are domestic agencies that were involved with maybe, detaining certain people involved with signals intelligence programs, maybe, and also too, to listen to and gather information regarding these people that may have been detaining people involved with a number of illegal operations, Arab operations in the year 2000, 2001. I think that's what was going on with these people. But throughout the years 2000, 2001, while this is going on, the FBI basically was noticing that there were, these strange Israelis, trying to sell these cheap arts to them in their homes. They were going to their homes, not to these agencies, but they were going to these people. They're wondering, well, how the hell did these people get our addresses? And so in March of 2001, the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive, which is a branch of the CIA, issued a national heads-up warning to the federal employees about the suspicious visitors of these federal facilities that were happening all throughout the Southwest and Northeast. And they basically gave a memo, which was a warning that employees of those agencies I mentioned observed both males and females in teams of 4, where there would be a lead female, very young, very pretty, and 3 males, attempting to bypass certain facility securities and federal buildings. And the memo also warned that federal agents arrested some of these individuals in Texas and in Oklahoma, and that 2 of these individuals they were involved with were trespassing and discovered that the suspects in Texas and Oklahoma possessed counterfeit work visas and green cards. So they weren't even here. Some of them weren't even here on legitimate visas. So these were just fake visas. And they were wondering, well, did they come here originally on actual visas, or did they come here with fake visas themselves? Who knows? Well, they don't know.
They should have just gone to Jeddah.
I think, yeah, exactly. But then that's a problem in itself too, Tommy, because we did the same thing to the Saudi operatives in the year 1999, 2000, 2001. What did we do? We detained some of them, and what did we do? We deported them because what did the first crime they commit? Well, visa violations. Yeah. And so you have to wonder that the Israelis and Arabs that running these signals intelligence operations, that they were all here on student visas, every last one of them, because they were all deported back to their countries. So that means that the congressional inquiries in the United States, the 9/11 Commission, for example, or the Joint House Inquiry, or the FBI's Pent Bomb report, or the CIA's Inspector General report, regarding intelligence failures in their agency. Do you think they would like to talk to these people? I'm sure they would. But guess what? Because of certain allied affiliations within our Democratic and Republican House and Senate, they basically saw that this would be a breach of that friendship and also a breach of mega proportions that would basically embarrass or even worse, show that there was a much more nefarious connection to the September 11, 2001 attacks. But because this isn't sexy enough and because this isn't outlandish enough, this is basically ignored for the much more grandiose and fantastical, which is, I think, is such a crime in itself. Because this stuff that I'm talking about is not some, crazy conspiracy. This actually happened. And it's basically ignored altogether because, one, the federal government isn't talking about it because they don't want you to know about it, the public. And two, the fringe aspects basically have shielded the real conspiracies of 9/11 involving Israel for the more fantastical involving Larry Silverstein and Benjamin Netanyahu, who, by the way, I would say both people, especially Netanyahu, to be a criminal. But I mean, for God's sakes, Larry Silverstein, that's a freaking stretch. I mean, we do have certain names that were involved with this very covert and very expensive Israeli intelligence ring. And it's very unfortunate that none of what I'm talking about today is actually covered by anyone.
No, I'm looking up because I remember hearing this story, and I just want to kind of back up some of what you're saying. All right, so this is from Deutsche Welle. I guess it's a German paper.
Okay.
All right, it says December 3rd, 2021, and the headline is Israeli spyware used to spy on U.S. officials. And there are constantly all right, here's another one. Israel has been caught spying on the U.S. again. Wait, when was this? September 23rd, 2019. Politico, Israel accused of planning mysterious spy devices near the White House. This was September 12th, 2019. So this isn't something that is just in this story. This is continuously going on. And for some reason, I remember hearing something 2 or 3 months ago. That's what I was originally looking to see if I could find when I looked at my phone, was to see it because I remember a story of about Israel spies in the U.S. and how it's the biggest spy network in the U.S. is from Israel. But I did not see that whenever I looked it up. So I could be misremembering that. But for some reason, a couple of months ago, I thought I remembered that story popping up. So it's very it's quite common for Israel to be spying on the U.S. on their officials, as we stated earlier, overriding, the president of the United States, Netanyahu, was guilty of back in 2012, 2013, something like that. So the relationship between Israel and the U.S. is quite confounding in many ways, because the U.S. is supposed to be the power, but Israel is wielding all this power over the U.S. and being able to do all these things, spy on the U.S. What do you think that these guys were here because they had intelligence that tipped them off to what was going to happen? Or do you think they were here because they were involved in what was happening?
Yeah, this is a hard question to answer because I think it's a mixture of both. And to be honest with you, like I said, it's unfortunate in regards to this subject. There are much more questions than answers. Um, the investigation alludes to Amdocs, which is a multinational corporation that was founded in Israel and headquartered in Missouri. And the conspiracy involving that was coming from a Fox News four-part series in December of 2001. It was headed by Carl Cameron, in which talked about the early 2000 Amdocs investigation that federal agencies conducted a counterintelligence investigation to determine if the Amdocs was basically used by Israel to eavesdrop on the U.S. government, the federal government. Later on, of course, it was covered up and said there was no such crime. But Fox News, of all places, Fox News basically uncovered this project and did a four-part investigation into it. And they found out that, yes, Amdocs was viewed by the Israeli apparatus, Mossad, to spy on not just the FBI, but the Secret Service, the DEA, the U.S. Marshals, and whatnot, and that this arch student ring was involved with that. Now, were the moving companies involved with that? There was no evidence to suggest that, but there were a number of Israeli projects going on inside the United States all throughout 2000 and all throughout 2001, which was later covered up, coincidentally enough, and conveniently, by the U.S. federal government. And we still have more questions and answers regarding just what information was collected by the Israeli government regarding what they knew, because according to Israel, that they gave the FBI and the CIA a list of the hijackers' names before they even committed the attack on September 11, 2001. Now, how did they get those names? Did they just pull them out of a hat? Was it from the Amdocs investigation? Was it from the moving company's investigation? We'll never know, because we deported every single one of these people under pressure of the Israeli and U.S. government. And so we'll never know what they collected, in the same fashion that we'll never know what the Saudis uncovered, because we deported every single one of them. And I don't know what to tell you regarding the more intricate details about what they uncovered, but one can only speculate rationally and reasonably that they probably were collected some very sensitive information about Al Qaeda and the affiliates who helped them inside the United States, because why else would they cover these people? Who told them that they were in the country? Who told them that certain members of the Hamburg cell or that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hadmi were in California? Why were they running these operations to begin with? And coincidentally, why were they running operations on the people involved with 9/11? Did the NSA tell them that? Did the CIA tell them that? Or were they running their own separate investigation into these people? Well, we will never know, because that information is either classified or they're being held by Israel and Saudi Arabia, and we'll never know what they have.
Sorry, I just found something that completely cosigns on what you say. This is from antiwar.com, one of our favorite websites.
Absolutely.
This is from March 5th, 2002. Is written by Sylvain Seipel Lemon and translated by Malcolm Garris. All right. So just the first paragraph, I'm not even going to go past that, because I don't think there's any need to go beyond that. It is undoubtedly the largest case of Israeli spying in the United States that has been made public since 1986. In June 2001, an investigative report detailed the activities of more than 100 Israeli agents, some presenting themselves as fine arts students, others tied to Israeli high-tech companies. All were challenged by the authorities, were questioned, and a dozen of them are still imprisoned. One of their tasks was to track the Al-Qaeda terrorists on American territory without informing the federal authorities. Elements of the investigation taken up by American television Fox News reinforced this thesis that Israel did not transmit to the United States all the evidence in its possession on the preparation of the September 11th attacks. Okay, so that's kind of what we've been hinting at this entire time, that they had information we didn't have. why wouldn't they transmit that? So I look at it this way, and you can correct me if you think I'm off in any of my speculation here. Why would I give you information to tip you off to an attack that is going to cause you to have the same enemies I currently have if I need your firepower to defeat those enemies?
I think that's absolutely reasonable speculation. It's something that I probably would agree with myself.
I mean, that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah.
Israel knew what was going to happen. Part of the reason I think they knew what was going to happen is because of their relationship with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And they did not say anything to the United States because they knew that if the attack took place, that it would then ensure the United States was fighting the same enemy that they felt like they had been fighting.
Yes, and they would ensure that the one country that would be quickly invaded would be Iraq. And by the way, that would line up with the neoconservatives who have been dying for Iraq invasion since the mid-1990s. And that was
if Israel and Saudi Arabia are pretty close allies. I know there are differences between the two. You know, I recognize that. But why would Israel be cheering for Iraq to be invaded, understanding that the next regime going into power would be tied to Iran? Because they have much more problem with, they've always had much more of a problem with Iran than they ever have with Iraq, right?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, this is outlined in the Yodid Yunan plan, which was basically Israeli Yitzhak, I forget his last name, in Oded Yunan, basically outlined the destabilization project of countries like Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Egypt, and Lebanon. That would all these basically were Shia countries, by the way, and all allies, strong allies to Iran. So basically, what they wanted to do was basically destabilize the region in the hopes of basically breaking that alliance in the hopes of having a country that's basically divided. They actually wanted to divide Iraq into, I think, 3 or 4 provisions.
Yeah, but Iraq was Sunni at the time.
Yeah, at the time. But
that's what I'm saying. Why would you overthrow the Sunnis to install the Shias? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, they did what they didn't foresee was that with the overthrow of Saddam, they didn't see that the Sunnis would take charge, but they did. And basically, what happened was you had the Sunnis
Shia.
basically, the Shia, and the Sunnis would actually revolt, and that's what created the civil war, which led to the formation of ISIS or the Islamic State in Iraq. Or Al Qaeda.
Well, it was quite evident that the Shia was the majority population,
right?
And that the authoritarian hand of Saddam Hussein was the only thing keeping these people in check.
Right, exactly right. But they considered at the time in the early 1990s, the Israeli government actually considered Iraq more of a regional threat than Iran. Iran was basically under harsh sanctions at the time, and also at the time when the United States enacted sanctions in 1990 for the Oil for Food program, which is basically pressured under Israel. By the way, nonetheless, it was considered an act of war. But at that time, by destroying Iraq's infrastructure from within with these sanctions, it also created a new problem ahead. And that was when bin Laden basically brought up in the interview he actually conducted with Ali Rabi in Germany. In Great Britain, in which it was an extension of Al Qaeda office in Great Britain. And they basically said that bin Laden actually considered that an act against the Muslim community. And the Muslims were outraged because this Oil for Food program, which, by the way, you know about that infamous clip of Madeleine Albright saying, yes, I think it's a problem, but it's a problem worth
We
it was worth
think the price was worth
right?
it.
The price was
Yeah.
worth it. 500,000.
500,000 kids, 500,000 Iraqi children have been killed.
Yeah.
Do you think the price is worth it? Yes, we think the price
Yeah.
is worth it. Yes, I know
Now,
that clip.
with
I know
those-
that clip very well.
Yeah, sure. And everyone should, because wow, what a horrible person this person is, right? But this caused a huge backlash.
But it gives you an insight as
Yeah.
to how the government views people,
Sure.
just in general. Like the sacrifice of, it's like Stalin, Stalin said, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic.
Right. Sure.
And that's the way that the government views your life, right? If you die of poisoning from the vaccine, oh, that's a tragedy. But if 1 million people die of poisoning from the vaccine, that's just a statistic.
Right.
We can move on. Oh, it's just a percentage. It's blah, blah. You can sell that, right? And so,
So with the
sorry, I just
no, that's right. That's right.
it just gets me thinking to like this, the sick ends that these people are going to at this point in time with different strategies, whether it's ESG or the wokeness or whatever they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I'm looking at it and I'm going, these people are just modern day eugenicists. That's all it is. It's just modern day eugenics.
I just called them mentally deficient. So
no, it's just it's a continuation of the eugenics movement, is all it is. It's just, instead of them forcing you, like it's like back in the 1920s, right? They forced sterilization on people, right?
Right.
Then in the 1970s, the Supreme Court ruled, oh yeah, you can't force sterilization on people. In 2021, they figured out a way to get parents to voluntarily sterilize their children. I mean, it's the same shit,
Yeah, just about. But yeah, with the awful food program, actually killed approximately 500,000 men, women, and children, mostly elderly men. But that caused a huge outrage within the Muslim community. And so the prime minister of Israel at the time, Yitzhak Shamir, who was part of the Likud party, basically advocated for that program. And basically what happened was it created a shift within the Iraqi government. So it basically destabilized the government a little bit, but they weren't happy with that. So with the new prime ministers like Yitzhak Rabin, and later on I think it was Shimon Peres, basically they didn't pressure the United States to basically push out Saddam Hussein. It wasn't until 1996, when Benjamin Netanyahu became the prime minister, that he tried to tried to get the United States to basically force the issue of getting Saddam Hussein out of the region, and basically put in a Western-backed leader to basically co-align with what was ordered in the Oded Yanam plan. And what happened in 1996? Well, we saw the publication, or the publication of Paul Wolfowitz's doctrine, the Planned Policy Program, which was basically a neocon project about destabilizing Iraq, and destabilizing much of the region surrounding it. And so the New York Times basically let loose this project, saying, hey, we think this is a neocon think tank, basically trying to force the issue of getting rid of Saddam Hussein. And basically the neocons under Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, Paul Wolfowitz, the real ghouls of
the real neocons.
Yeah, those people.
Like and whenever I say the real neocons, I'm like, especially when you mention like Richard Pearl, like true Trotskyite, like
sure,
like that's where neocons came from. They were Trotskyites, right? And so these guys were sick.
Yeah, these guys didn't care how many people would be killed in the process of war, and so because all they cared about
everything for revolution.
That's right.
Right.
As long as it benefits the Israeli home country.
Well, as long as it benefits the power of the empire.
Right.
Right,
exactly.
Israel's just a proxy of the empire.
Right.
At this point.
Right. Exactly. So yeah, that's what happened. And then of course, a year later, we saw the formation of the Project for New American Century, a neocon think tank.
Yeah.
And so they gave a letter to Bill
Is
Clinton.
that when the is that the think tank that came out with that letter talking about what was it, overthrowing like 7 different nations? I have it saved somewhere. Maybe it wasn't them. Maybe I'm thinking of something
No,
else.
you're talking. That's the General Wesley Clark memo that he said he saw.
No. There was where it's talking about creating a new 9/11 or a new Pearl Harbor.
That's the Project for New American Century.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what I'm talking about.
That was created in '97 by Robert Kagan and William Crystal.
Yeah, I have it saved somewhere.
From the Weekly Standard. Yeah. So yeah, the pressure was on the Clinton administration to invade Iraq. And then when the 1998 East Africa bombings happened, they basically wrote a memo to Clinton saying, we demand, not like good, we demand you invade Iraq because they're involved with this. But they weren't involved. They weren't involved with bin Laden or Iraq. And so Clinton refused. And what happened? Well, the scandal happened. That's what happened to him. And so he had to resign under shame regarding it. And, there's a lot of conspiracy involving that too. Was Israel behind that? Because they were running the Amdocs investigation right around that time. And Bill Clinton was messing around with Monica Lewinsky. And you know him, he's basically a womanizer. And there's a lot of mystery regarding the Clinton Foundation. I'll tell you that.
Well, and
but that's for another discussion.
Are there any ties to all this in the Iran-Contra scandal?
Yeah, that's going way far, and there's a lot to talk about there. And
I'm just saying, if you look at it years-wise, it's really not that far. You're talking about 10 years.
Yeah.
This could have been something that they've been trying to cover. They obviously were trying to cover keep Israel's name out of that, because even still today, a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people recognize when you say Iran-Contra. They recognize that, but they don't recognize Israel's role in it, right? And it's okay, was all this stuff related in some way, shape, or form? Was there a common thread of the cover up that was going through here? I don't know. It's kind of like whenever I look at the Ukraine war, right? I look at it, and a lot of people want to talk about 2014, right? And the Maidan revolution, which was pretty much a coup run by the United States and its NGOs, right? We know USAID was right in the middle of there, and George Soros is right there involved with USAID, and they're funded by the CIA. And that was involved in the Maidan revolution of 2014. But one thing that people often fail to look at, and it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is 2011 and the snow revolution. A lot of people don't remember this. There were, from 2011 to 2013, there were major protests in Moscow, in Russia. And Putin was accusing the United States of organizing these protests in the middle of Russia. How related were they? Because they get shut down in 2013, and then suddenly, not even a year later, Maidan kicks off. Right?
Right.
It's all right, he might have a point. I don't know.
I think there's an indirect connection that basically lines up with the history regarding the overall project itself, but there's so much mystery more than, like I said, there's more questions than answers regarding it. But there is a direct and indirect connection between, say, Iran-Contra to 9/11 itself. I mean, for example, the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, that was blamed on Iraq at first. And they tried to connect Ramzi Youssef as an Iraqi, and he wasn't. They basically tried to connect the 1998 East Africa bombings to Iraq. The try to blame Iraq isn't coming just from the United States. It's coming from the neoconservatives who have a dual loyalty to Israel and the United States.
Yeah.
So this war against Iraq that goes back, God's sakes, 15, 17 years. And it's just like, they use every pretext to basically blame Iraq for everything. And with Iraq destroyed now, now go down the line. What did we see after 9/11, after Iraq was destroyed? Well, under the Obama administration, did it end there? Because remember, he ran on the hope and change program. Well, there wasn't much hope because there wasn't much change. What did he do? He continued those same policies, just like the Bush administration. In fact, in some regards, he was worse. He invaded Syria and basically went there on the pretext of fighting the war on terror. Meanwhile, there was a covert CIA operation called Timber Sycamore, which was actually funding and training the Syrian jihadists, these al-Qaeda affiliates, to help overthrow the Assad government. Well, guess what? That was in the Oden Yunan plan and the Paul Wolfowitz doctrine, similar to that itself. What came after Syria? Well, Libya. Muammar Gaddafi was next. And they used the pretext. I just did a video today about Libya because on this day, 11 years ago, the Libyan leader, Muammar Gaddafi, was killed. And who was he killed by? The CIA-backed Ultra-National Transitional Council, the National Transitional Council, which basically in the weeks and months prior to that, who ordered that invasion? Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State. And basically that was a woman's war, as they would say, because Hillary Clinton, Susan Rice, Samantha Power, they all advocated for that invasion. Obama did not. Biden did not, but they went along with it anyway. And even in Obama's memoirs, he basically does say it's the biggest mistake of his presidency. I can name about 20 more. But, but you could see all the countries that are basically either Shia related or allied with Iran and Iraq, all these countries that didn't have an Islamist problem, all of a sudden are basically totally destroyed, with the only failure being Syria. All these countries are basically destroyed or replaced with either these civil war or jihadists are basically running about open air slave market.
Well, yeah, because we're fighting them in we're fighting them on one front and we're funding them on another.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
How's that a winning strategy?
Yeah, how does that?
And that's really what all that Trump did when he took office, and he said, I'm going to defeat ISIS, and ultimately he did, for the most part, is he just stopped funding them. He's like, quit sending money to them and let's just kick their ass.
He ended the Timber Sycamore. It was him in 2017 that ended the Timber Sycamore
program. Right. Yeah. And I have plenty of problems with Trump, but he did a few things right.
That's right. He did a few things right. But you won't ever hear it from the left itself. But yeah, I mean,
well, I don't even know if they can pronounce Timber Sycamore. And the only people I've ever heard talk about that is you, me, Scott Horton, and Dave Smith. That's the extent of the amount of people I've ever heard utter those words.
I gotta give some credit to Dave DeCamp because he actually brings us.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Dave's amazing.
Yeah, Dave in college.
Sorry, Dave. No, I'm not throwing shade your way, bro.
No, but you're absolutely right, though. Hardly anyone knows about the Timber Sycamore.
Nobody talks about it.
Nobody.
I remember Dave Smith bringing it up on CNN on what's that chick, that weird looking chick with the funked up glasses, her fucking show. And fucking next thing I know, he's no longer a fucking political contributor on CNN. What was that? I can't think of that chick's name. He was on her show for a couple of years. Really? He was a contributor on her show for a couple of years. Essie Cup.
Oh shoot, yeah, I know that person. Yeah.
I think it was Essie Cup. I'm pretty sure it was Essie Cup.
Yeah.
He was a contributor on this chick show on CNN for a couple of years. He brought it up on her show one time, and then I think he got kicked off of CNN like right after that. It was like, no, you don't say that.
Yeah, figures. But it goes right back to the point that you made earlier about why things like 9/11 happened. Why did the 93 bombing happen? Why did the 1990 East Africa bombings happen? Because they actually allowed to happen because of a greater goal, and that's the foreign policy guidelines that were written many years prior to these events even happening. And so they need a pretext in order to fulfill these guidelines on happening, how to defeat Iraq, how to defeat Syria, how to defeat Libya, We can't just go and invade these countries because we'll get the backlash from who? The American people. We need a pretext in order for these to happen. And 9/11, I could tell you right now, you could have said Easter Island was behind that, and they would have invaded Easter Island. Somebody had to pay for 9/11. It had to be big, had to be grandiose. And meanwhile, if you really think about it, on the greater, picture of this, 3,000 people died. And that's a lot. I mean, that's mass murder. But in the greater scheme of things, it's nothing compared to what we did after.
Millions of people.
And no, you won't hear 1 million people in Iraq. No, you'll hear about the 2,997 that died in New York. You won't hear about 1 million people in Iraq. Yeah. And I got some people that I know personally that say they don't care. They don't care about that number in Iraq. And to me, that's the first step of sociopathy.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a problem here in the States. But that's another conversation.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's a lot of these people are, and I mean, we're kind of veering, but we'll steer it back here in a second.
Sure.
But that's kind of a nationalism that kind of resides in America without claiming it to be nationalism, right? And this is kind of like the whole liberalism trick, right? It's like the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. It's kind of that kind of thing,
right? Yeah,
it's like the greatest thing that liberalism ever did was convincing liberals that nationalism doesn't exist.
Right?
It's like so, because you hear it all the time. It's just like, oh yeah, we got to feed the poor. Okay, what about the starving Yemenis that are being bombed by Saudi Arabia?
Right.
No, fuck those people.
No, I didn't say everybody. No, look over here, Ukrainian, blonde hair, blue eyes.
Exactly. They're white. Let's talk about them.
That's right. Exactly. That's the crime. Yeah, exactly.
They're white and the chicks are hot. So let's talk about them.
Let's not talk about the Middle East.
Those are breeders. Those brown people.
They deserve it somehow.
Yeah.
9/11. That's what you got to say.
They look like ants. Have you ever noticed they're crawling out of sand and they're brown? They're like ants.
Yeah, the demonization of the Arab Muslim community.
Yeah.
So
it's just this is liberalism at its finest, man. It's liberal nationalism, and though it's not surrounded around a nation, there is a culture involved in it, and an elitist kind of ideal involved in it. And the hillbillies in Kentucky, no, they're not part of it. But those Ukrainians, those are our people.
Yeah. And but to go right back to your point about the Israeli intelligence operations and what purpose they serve. Well, the purpose they serve is to collect information that would benefit their country in regards to the greater geopolitical goals. Is this
Mossad? Who is this? Do they have, like, here we have like CIA, DIA, NSA. Right. Do they have a bunch of other organizations, or is it just all Mossad?
Well, they have the Shin Bet, which is the national clandestine intelligence services.
Okay,
but they don't go outside the country. Mossad does.
They're like FBI.
Yeah, they would, right, and the Mossad would be like the CIA of sorts.
Okay,
but they also have other covert counterterrorism units. Sayeret Mascaral, Unit 8200, which is a clandestine, very big now.
They also have the CIA, NSA, and DIA.
Well, I mean, they work together now, yeah.
But we just pay for it.
Right. But also, remember, to an extent, because Israel comes first before they do. But they'll work with them for the benefit of only Israel.
Right.
That's it. But they'll use them.
Did you hear what's the Saudi Arabian crown prince name? Bin Salman?
Mohammed bin Salman.
Yeah. Did you hear what he just said?
Recently?
Yeah.
Oh, give it to me.
Yeah, he had because Joe Biden threw a big fit, right? Remember when they were talking about cutting the amount of oil.
Yes.
All right. So Joe Biden threw a big fit and like saying something. Well, Mohammed bin Salman came out I think yesterday and said if you can try to threaten us, but we're Saudi Arabia. We exist and we live by jihad. And it was Al Qaeda's playbook. Like basically, he's like reading Al Qaeda's playbook. It was wild.
Really?
Yes. I'll have to try to find the clip.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, and send it to you. It was wild because he's like, we live by jihad. You will not like.
Oh, I've seen this.
Will not wipe us off the map.
I've seen this.
Yeah, it was just the wildest shit, man. I was like, whoa, dude. Like,
yeah, I reposted.
Know your audience, bro.
Yeah, exactly. This guy was screaming about, if you push us,
yes.
if you push us, we know about martyrdom.
Yes,
that's
yes.
what he was saying.
Yeah, we live a life of martyrdom.
We live a life of martyrdom. I'm like, wow, right in your face.
We live by the rules of jihad every day.
Right, and
it's like wild.
I love hearing about reforming. Saudi Arabia is going to reform. Pressure on the United States want to reform. They're built on the precepts of Wahhabi Islam, and that goes back 150 years.
Well, it's why the Sunnis are so much more dangerous than the Shia.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that strain, maybe not every Sunni, but that strain runs through the core of Sunni Islam.
Right. It's the brother of Saud al-Shahan. I'm looking at the video now. That's why I'm saying it.
No,
he's the brother of a convicted drug kingpin who's married to the ruling clan, and his name is Saud al-Shahan, Nawaf al-Shahan.
But isn't he one of the princes or?
Oh, he's part of the kingdom. So in other words, the kingdom has approximately 5,000, which is aligned with the seven family lines of Ibn al-Saud. So they're called the Sudari seven. It's 7 sons under Ibn Saud. That family line is the kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Gotcha. I just wanted to make sure I was getting it right.
Yeah.
So I was wrong. It wasn't Mohammed bin Salman, but
no, it was the.
But it was somebody up high in the chain of command.
Oh yeah, if they're part of that clan, yeah, they're up there.
Yeah. All right. No, I don't know why it just popped in my head. I was like, oh shit, that was crazy.
I thought it was nuts when he wrote. I was like, wow.
Yeah, I saw it earlier today. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. We gotta look. You have time?
Yeah, come on.
Okay. So we've been talking about we were talking about the dancing Israelis. We're talking about what actually happened. What their possible roles were, the reasons behind why they existed. But there are a lot of 9/11 truthers, and this is something we continue to touch on throughout this series, is there are people out there that are spreading information that is either wrong or false intentionally. And so we want to correct that. We want to like touch on these subjects a little bit and let people know what it is these people are saying, what to look out for, and not to go down that path, because a lot of times these paths lead you down the wrong way. Like you can have a short fork, but 10 miles down the road, that small fork is 20 miles apart, right?
Very much.
So
very much so.
So what is it that there are people out there that utilize this narrative around the dancing Israelis in order to paint kind of an anti-Semitic kind of feel around the whole 9/11 truth? I don't even know if anti-Semitic is the right word. It's a buzzword right now. So it's like, it's on my top of mind, as Korean Jean-Pierre might say. So
no.
What is it that, how are they utilizing this narrative falsely?
From my experience only, and everyone has a different experience, but from my experience of traveling across the viral media world, Facebook, Twitter, and elsewhere, the most outlandish, the most damning, the most sleaziest fringe conspiracies are involving Israel. And it's amazing because there's so little information as opposed to like Saudis. There's a lot more information pointing to them. But regarding Israel, you would think that reading from a lot of these fringe theories, you would think that Israel not only didn't hijack the planes, but they remotely controlled the planes. That weren't, and not just there, but that they outlined and planned 9/11, that they actually got everybody involved who saw the hijackers to be either crisis actors or threatened to go along with the story. Some of the most absolutely fanatical, just fringe, I mean, really fringe theories involving 9/11 always pertain to Israel. And a lot of these people that I noticed from are people that are either like pro-Palestinian or evangelical Christians. Now, this is not a charge on all of them. I'm talking about just 9/11 in general. And a lot of these people hide behind the fact that they're anti-Zionist. Now, I would say to you, from my experience, some of them really are anti-Zionist, but a good majority of them, from my experience, are just anti-Jew. They're anti-Israel, which actually lends to the fact that a lot of the stuff that they're reading from are from people like Christopher Bolin, for example, who is an absolutely huge anti-Semitic trope. And a lot of his information are basically fringe. Now, he'll say some truthful things about Israel. In fact, he does bring up a lot of the crimes that Israel has done over the years. But on top of that, he sprinkles it, just like Alex Jones. He'll sprinkle it with the most fantastical theories that don't even make sense. But because it points to Israel, they don't care. Hey, this guy was right. Maybe he's right about this. But that's how Alex Jones caters to his audience. Oh, he's right about this. Maybe he's right about this. But you'll get people that just don't have any type of verifiable information that just blame Israel for everything. People like Rebecca Roth, for example. Ace Baker is another one. Jim Fetzer, my God. So yeah, these people that basically just come right out and just say Israel is behind every attack in the United States history. They did 9/11. They did all this. And basically what happens is there's so many of these people as opposed to reputable researchers like a Scott Horton, like a Nelson Martins or Ryan Dawson, or very few people.
Eric Jackman.
Eric, and Ray Nowosielski, Robbie Martin. So there are people that do point Israeli crimes regarding 9/11. Yeah, there may be, maybe there's foreknowledge. I would say so, but complicity, I can't go there. And there's no information to suggest that there is complicity. But does that mean there isn't? I would suggest to you that there might be. I think even on a bigger scale. But until we can basically get that information, we can only say that they were involved with the intelligence operation and that they knew more than what they alluded to the FBI. But that's as far as I could go. That's basically me telling you the truth. Now, I don't want you to just believe me. I want you to take what we've been saying all this time and you research it yourself. And remember, do proper research. That's what I want you to do. That's what I tell all my followers on YouTube and Twitter anyway. And that's what we desperately need, more reputable researchers itself. And it's unfortunate because the one subject that desperately needs like real reputable researchers is Israel, because there's far too many fringe conspiracy theorists that blame them for everything under the sun.
Well, all right. So I understand what you just said, but as far as the subject at hand, it was a little vague. So can you get into more detail as to what they're saying about?
Right. Sure. Now, for example, the one issue they love to bring up is the World Trade Center. That the Silverstein property is owned by Larry Silverstein. Basically, he wasn't there on 9/11. He's always there at the windows of the world eating breakfast. But on September 11, 2001, he wasn't there because according to him, his wife told him, don't miss your
yes, we talked about this a little bit.
Don't miss your appointment, your facial cleansing appointment. I forgot the name of it.
Yeah.
Dermatologist. Your dermatologist.
Yeah, he had to get his pubes waxed or something.
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, he wasn't there. That's suspicious as heck to me anyway. But
yeah, obviously. It's like with the Oklahoma City bombing, the ATF not being in the building that day.
Right. Why weren't they?
Right.
Right,
It's
exactly.
suspicious as fuck. Right. Okay.
Anyway,
so
but
we can agree that it's suspicious.
right, we can agree. Absolutely. Now, here's the problem is that these fringe theorists that love to blame Israel for everything, they say that Larry Silverstein, because he did an interview with some, I think, documentary TV show on History Channel, I think, where he basically says, I was talking to a fire commander. Everybody knows this clip. I was talking to a fire commander, and we said we had such terrible loss of life, and we decided to just pull the operation, and we decided to watch the building collapse.
Yeah.
Well, according to fringe theorists, he's basically admitting that no, we were going to completely demolish the building on purpose so that we could destroy the building because for whatever reason.
Yeah, he's admitting insurance fraud or some shit
right.
like that.
Why would he do that on national TV? In the same fashion as what Rebecca Roth says regarding the dancing, like the art student ring. To her, the art student ring is not the art student ring that I talked about tonight. No, to her, it's the 6 guys that were in the World Trade Center doing this stupid art program called Gelatin B, and they weren't even Israeli. And they basically were putting all these explosives. And meanwhile, there's a guy taking pictures of them. Now, to you, a rational mind, you're rigging a building with explosives. Are you going to have your face photographed for the world to see in a book that's being sold on Amazon right now? No, it doesn't work like that. No, these people weren't even Israeli, and those boxes weren't bombs; they were fuse holders, and they were from a company called Little Fuse. It's called BB88, and they're strip wires. And because that area of the World Trade Center was undergoing renovation, just like the Pentagon was going to go in renovation, and when that was it. But yeah, I mean, I'm not going to blame Gelatin B to be Israeli because they're art student team. No. The one art student ring that was Israeli often gets ignored for this one because of people like Rebecca Roth and Barbara Honegger and others that basically want to blame Israel for everything.
Well, and you have to ignore so much evidence as well to go down this path of blaming Israel for the entire thing, right?
Sure.
Like other than the 7 Israelis that you and I talked about tonight, it was 19 hijackers with Saudi Arabian passports.
That's
right. Yeah, it's like, right. Okay, why didn't they have Israeli passports?
I absolutely. Now here's another one. Here's a fringe theory. It's not related to Israel, but I always hear this: the passport that was found in Manhattan, right? The passport that belonged to one of the hijackers named Satam al-Saskami. Now I hear this all
it was
time.
Put there.
Yeah, that it was planted there. Now, listen, if that was planted there by whatever agents, right? Why was that not an Iraqi passport? You want to tie Iraq to 9/11?
Yeah, you're trying to tie Iraq to it. Right. Yeah.
Why wasn't he Iraqi? He was a Saudi Arabian, right? Yeah. Do I think that's suspicious as heck? Yeah, but paper does survive. Nobody talks about the ID.
I haven't seen the passport, so I can't tell you what condition it is.
It was
all I know is they could read it. That's all I know about it.
It was for a crash. It was actually in good condition, but it was soaked in jet fuel. So I don't know what to tell you other than that.
I don't know.
Right.
Like weird things happen.
Right.
Like we talked about this a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
Like I've lived through hurricanes. Like odd things happen.
Yeah, odd things happen, man.
You would be shocked at what survives hurricanes.
You don't need you don't need to add extra conspiracy when you have a big conspiracy on your hand already.
Right.
Huge.
And that's why it's so easy to say, okay, these people, if they're not feds, the feds couldn't do a better job of planting like the narrative.
Oh my God, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I mean, for God's sakes, look, if you need a bigger conspiracy than tonight, what I'm alluding to, that's just a small conspiracy. Oh, by the way, everything that I just talked to you tonight about with Tommy is also not mentioned in the 9/11 Commission or the Joint House Inquiry. You have to wonder why. There's a lot missing, and I talk about it all the time. And these conspiracies are enormous, and there's so many of them. And hardly anyone talks about them because they don't talk enough about Israel. And that's a problem in our hands. And it's not a problem that, for me, it isn't. I have a saying, all the years of like being on the internet regarding 9/11 the last 5 years, I come away with this, that according to truthers, 9/11 isn't Jewish enough. And according to debunkers, 9/11 isn't Islamic enough. And for me, it's right in between. It's amazing. It's amazing. I can't believe it sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So what are we going to talk about next week?
I think we should talk about the ripple effects of 9/11. What came after it? Because what came after 9/11, Tommy, was...
Well, no, I want to get to that, but I don't know if I'm ready to get to that yet.
Okay.
That's going to be one of the last episodes I want to do with you on this.
Sure.
But what do you think about talking about Saudi Arabia next week?
Well, that would be very interesting. Yeah, there is a lot to go here. And
yeah, see, we haven't even touched on this.
Right. Well, we did talk partially about it with Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafahad. But regarding Saudi intelligence involving the whole operation, it really basically involves itself with Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafahad. But you know what we should do? We should talk about
28 pages.
Well, that's the Joint House Inquiry, 28 pages. But yeah, all right, let's talk about the connection of the Saudi government in connection to the hijackers, if you want. I think another subject that we should talk about is something that is often not talked about, and that is the NSA.
Okay. Yes.
The signals intelligence operation.
If there's anybody who can do an hour on the NSA, it's you.
Yeah, because this is to me, it's the most important agency of all.
So
nobody talks about it.
So we got Saudi, NSA, and we're definitely going to do the ripple effects. That's definitely one of the ones that you and I have talked about doing in the future. All right. But yeah, I think we should touch on the Saudi angle.
Okay. Yeah, let's do both at the same time.
Yeah. Let's do the Saudi angle and maybe chat a little bit about the 28 pages as well, because there was a lot left out of that. So yeah, I'll have to touch up on it because I've only read through it one time, but yeah, I'll read through it again this week, and we'll definitely do that.
Perfect.
Sounds good, man. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.
Said you're just a slave. All your good intentions took you to your grave. Your pride is how they killed you. With the flag you waved just like a fool. They promised you a mountain, gifted you a stone. They demanded that you throw it into your neighbor's home, and then seize all that they worked for and give it to the throne just like a tool. Well, as we all just stand in line and glorify new ways of being cruel, it seems to me humanity is not something that they're teaching us in school. They dumbs down all around, propaganda, their pollution. They set a cage up on the stage, a facade for all solution. They build a wall, block them all from this mental institution. It's insane. Now they're writing their own rule books and they're crossing all their T's. They're fashioning their people to all wear beggars' knees. If you want a clean drink of water, well, you must say pretty please. It's all a game. As we all just stand in line and justify these crimes done in our names, it seems to me authority and tyranny are both one and the same. to blame, and we'll stack them up like cordwood, watch them sizzle on the flames for good. Well, as we all just stand in line waiting for some kind of Robin Hood, our liberty will never be until our right to freedom is understood.